man, what a wild weekend. The St. Helens, the Mount St. Helens Twitter account started going back and forth with me. I don't want to get any more specific than that. And then the Belichick interview just has me in shambles. And in the interest of promoting for the company, CBS had a wide-ranging conversation with Bill Belichick this morning. And I don't know how to describe it. You just need to go find it. After the show's over, you need to go find it. I tried 3 different times to watch it in its entirety. I couldn't make it. I'm allergic to cringe, so I couldn't make it. But some of you may be able to, and if you do, send me a scouting report on it. I've got mine. I want to see yours. We're jam-packed high atop a pretty chaotic downtown Nashville, Tennessee, all things considered. Bachelorette parties every 30 feet. NFL draft is in the rearview mirror. I think it taught us a lot about ourselves, guys and girls. I think it taught us, a lot about the ways of the world and how some of the ways of that football world haven't changed as much as the casuals amongst us told you they had changed. We're brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors, so we'll talk about that. It's not an NFL show. It's a college football show. But as is usually the case, there are plenty of college football, tilts, if you will, from the NFL draft, and everyone's got to take on the Shedeur Sanders thing. I do too. I'll talk to you about it. A lot of people are running their mouth about Quinn Ewers. I've got some things to say about that. Then again, I was already going to talk about that on this show because that went about the way I anticipated it would. What I did not anticipate, but what I am still prepared to discuss, is James Franklin getting into it with his own fan base up in State College. It's going to be a disagreeable show tonight, I'm warning you. You and I have disagreed in the past, and judging by how I think our audience will go on a majority of the topics in this show tonight versus the way I know I'm going to go, I will have some disagreements with you guys. We will keep it civil as usual. We believe in free speech on the campus of Pate State, and boy, are we going to exercise it tonight. Also, the transfer portal's closed, and I've got several takeaways on that, like 10 takeaways. So we got a jam-packed show. We're a little earlier than usual tonight because I have to travel for reasons I will spell out momentarily. They're watching us in Conroe, Texas, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Sylvester, Georgia, Medford, Oregon. Big few days coming for the Pate State Speaker Series. I'll be on the road Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of this week. We'll have our show Thursday night, same time as usual. But I will be, tomorrow, actually, I will be somewhere that we've never been before. I'll be on a campus I've never been on before, and I will be sitting down with a coach that we've never sat down with before. It's not Belichick. So follow at Josh Pate CFB on the socials. The interview will eventually air on the channel, but if you want a little sneak peek and some behind-the-scenes goings-on, it's always a good time of year to be following on the socials. Okay, so there's that. Here's this. The NFL draft just happened, and there's so much you can take away from just a college football perspective. Of course, you've got the mock drafts and who's went up in flames and the stuff about Shedeur and all that. Yes, everyone's talking about that. But I want to ask you this. I don't know where your mind went watching the draft, but here's where mine went. There's the way we want college football to be, utopian style, and then there's the way college football is, right? So I ask you this. How are we supposed to talk about this sport right now? Forget about the way you want it. The way we want it may not necessarily be the way it is right now, but we are looking at a landscape that's got to change, frankly. One way or the other. It's either got to speed up further down the road it's already on, or it's got to back up, and let's reverse course from the road we've gone down. Because right now, you don't have a sport, you got a couple of conferences. And if we want to stop pretending that there are 100-plus teams playing the same caliber of football, and we want to acknowledge that the SEC and the Big Ten are their own level of the sport, and then we divide up accordingly and we have a postseason format accordingly, okay. But we're kidding ourselves if we continue to go down this road, the Power Four road, if you will. There is no Power Four. Not that anyone went into this weekend with that grand illusion, but the NFL draft just slapped us in the face again with a reminder that there's the way you may want it to be, but then there's the way it is. And the way it is the SEC and the Big Ten, I can't believe this is real, just had 150 out of the 257 picks in the draft. And it gets even worse once you focus in the microscope on the first round. Mind-boggling number. 26 of 32 first-round draft picks were from the SEC or Big Ten. Both of them set respective conference records with how many kids they had drafted. The SEC just had 79 picked. The Big Ten had 71. So those are both conference records. Now, I had some of you who spoke up and you said, well, Josh, duh, now that the SEC has Texas and OU, and now that the Big Ten is loaded up on Oregon and USC and whatnot, of course they're going to have more picks. I know. That's the point. And then somebody else, in fact, someone else's said, well, yeah, Josh, but a lot of those draft picks didn't get recruited by those schools they transferred there. Yes, that's also the point. The sport has not calibrated itself, by the way, in any shape, form, or fashion the way that the portal truthers told you it would, or the NIL truthers told you it would. More on that in a little while. The peanut butter, it did get spread out a little bit more, but it's just on two pieces of toast. And maybe Miami's little piece over here and Clemson's little piece, Notre Dame's piece, but by and large, it's just two pieces of toast. That's where all the peanut butter is right now. But go back to the point we were just making. So a bunch of you are listening to this or watching this right now who do not like the way the sport's going. And you think I'm arguing with you. Oh, I'm not. I'm with you. I despise the current setup of this sport, just candidly. I love the sport. I despise that there's this much of the oxygen taken out of the room by two conferences. Confri, the plural of conference. We'll work on that one. I don't like it, but then again, when we get into the live bullets aspects of the regular season, it's not time to worry about what you prefer. And when you talk about how the playoffs should play out, I at least don't look at it and say this thing should be structured to make me feel good. When we're determining strength of schedule, we shouldn't rely on a calculation that provides me a result that makes me feel good. That's not the way I look at the sport. So whether I like it or not, you got to call it as it is once the season gets here. And so the NFL draft, to me, hammered home a couple of points again. The first one is strength of schedule interpretation is broken in college football. And there's another glaring example here of what we often say on this show. One of the biggest lies in all of American sports is in college football when anyone says you are what your record says you are. So let me give you a real-world NFL draft version of that rule. Florida was a 7-5 team in the regular season last year. Ole Miss got crucified for daring to lose to them, right? Because, they're barely a bowl team, 7-5. And people looked at it and they said, oh, it's a terrible loss for Ole Miss. And I looked at it and we got roasted for this on this show. I said, Florida's not having a season for the ages, but that's actually a really, really high-level quality of opponent that you're playing. And no one wanted to hear it. Not because they didn't think that we could walk it through to a logical conclusion. It's just there are people who hate the SEC, and therefore any argument that would prop up any SEC team that late in the year, therefore prop up Ole Miss's playoff resume, seemingly, was not going to be given the time of day. There was not a lot of rationale in the room, in other words. Florida just had 7 kids drafted. So here's what I did not just say. What I did not just say is Florida belonged in the playoff conversation or anything like that. Of course they didn't. What I'm saying is that was a high-level opponent. The difficulty level in playing Florida last year was obviously a little bit above and beyond what you would expect from your typical, in a vacuum, 7-win caliber team, which is what I've been screaming from the mountaintops for a long time in this sport. I don't need you to give Florida preferential treatment just because even though they lost 5 games, they're going to have a lot of guys drafted, so we need to give them a reward. They get what they deserve in the isolated sense of what a team gets. So Florida went to a low-level bowl game. That's where they belonged. But what I'm talking about is when you look up and down the Big Ten or you look up and down the SEC, and we're talking about relative strength of schedule, this kind of stuff is not the exclusive piece of evidence that I present. It's just a supporting piece of evidence. Not all 8-4 or 7-5 teams in this sport are created equal. By the very nature of how a conference schedule works, therefore a bunch of you play each other, someone's going to tote a bunch of losses that's still pretty good in these conferences. Because your conference record is always relative to how deep or not deep the conference is. So the SEC just sent 79 kids in the NFL draft. The Big Ten sent 71. The SEC had basically half the first round. And the Big Ten had 11, so 26 of the total 32 in the first round. Many of you do not like this. I don't either, but it is. So the strength of schedule reinforcement was the first thing that I took away. The other thing that kept hitting me was what the portal and NIL have done to the sport. I'm pausing. I'm doing the old peepaw lap drum there for a second because this is yet again something I don't particularly love that has happened. But this is one of the told you so moments on the show. That doesn't sound like me. But, back when we were at the dawn of this era, there were two camps that formed. You might remember this because it was only like 10 minutes ago. And camp number one was, man, portal and NIL is going to do way more harm than good to the overall landscape of college football. And that was people like me. And then we got drowned out by people saying, no, what this is going to do is it's going to open the door. Now the big boys can't hoard up all the talent, and now it'll be redispersed all over the country, and the results are going to be so randomized, and it's all BS. What happened was, in a sense, the talent did get divvied up a little bit more. That's the good news, I guess. The bad news, what they forgot to tell you, is the net result was it just got divvied up amongst two conferences. Ohio State's players just left and go to a Nebraska or a Purdue. Georgia's players leave and they just go to Texas A&M or Ole Miss. They're not leaving the conference, and if they are, it's because they probably weren't a high enough level player to crack any of the starting rotations for the major teams. Conversely, though, what absolutely is happening over and over and over again is the players that are high-level players on non-SEC and Big Ten rosters are filtering up to those conferences. You saw that over and over again in the draft this past weekend. You saw a kid that may have been from Ole Miss that's only been on Ole Miss's roster for 1 or 2 years, and you're looking at it saying, oh, that's like a vulture credit to Ole Miss. They didn't recruit that kid. They didn't develop that kid, but they're getting credit for him. Yeah, that's the way of the world now. That's the way of the world because that's how portal and NIL works. That's no disrespect to Ole Miss. They did exactly what the game allows them to do. But that's the way it works. But it wasn't too long ago, if you'll remember, some of us said, this isn't going to calibrate the sport like you think it's going to. The net result is just going to be that the rich get richer because there is no long-term change to this sport that doesn't see the same 15 or 20 programs and the same couple of conferences that have always dominated find a way to dominate. There is no landscape change. Do you know why? Because they're the ones in charge of it. So there was no world where they were going to allow this table to permanently shift against themselves. The next question becomes, at the dawn of the revenue sharing era, how will that change things? Because that's a far more fundamental change to college athletics in the sense that we're talking about than the portal and NIL ever were. But I'll tell you what did get validated. I'll tell you what the NFL draft did validate tenfold, and that is recruiting rankings have never been more accurate than they are right now. Now, I got pushback on this when I said it on the internet the other night, but there was no logic-based pushback. The only pushback was anecdotal pushback. It was exception to the rule pushback, which there always will be. Colin, you got that Chris Hummer tweet? Hummer put this out at the conclusion of the first round the other night. And it was first-round draft picks as high school recruits per the 24/7 Sports rankings. 11 former 5-stars went in the first round. 15 former 4-stars went in the first round. So out of the 32 first-round draft picks, 26 of the 32 were former blue-chip recruits. And then out of the other, 5 or 6 or 7, Cam Ward was one of them that everyone tried to throw back. Say, oh, you tell me recruiting rankings are accurate, buddy? What about Cam Ward? Cam Ward was a 0-star recruit. He was. Clearly unique circumstances because he didn't throw the forward pass in high school. But you are right. You are also right that an onion ring occasionally gets mixed in the fries at Burger King. So what did you order? Did you order onion rings or fries? You ordered fries. And you can either be an onion ring truther and let that rogue onion ring, the exception to the rule, dominate the conversation, or you can understand you order fries, you get fries, and because that's what they are. And there may be an onion ring mixed in every now and then. Personally, I always thought Burger King was mixing in the onion ring to convince you you need to try our onion rings. That's unofficial. That's not science, but I always thought they were doing that. But Cam Ward's the onion ring, man. He is going to play his pro ball right across the river here. Welcome to Davidson County, sir. He'll probably live in Williamson. But welcome, nonetheless, to Nashville. He's the onion ring. But you see the fries there. 26 of the 32 were former blue chip recruits. So then, in just a basic misunderstanding of math, I did have one guy who said only 11 of the top 32 picks were former 5-stars. That's terrible. It's phenomenal if you understand how many 5-star graded kids there are per cycle versus how many 4, 3, 2, and 1-star kids. You're talking about 32 5-star graded kids per cycle and thousands of not 5-stars. And you're trying to project 4 years ahead of time how many of them will go first round, and you win 11 of 32. It's phenomenal if you understand the basic numbers and conceptually what you're doing there. So I watched the draft as closely as I ever have. I've got some more to say later in the show from a different slant about it, but yeah, it is so clear that there is not a ditch, there is not a gap, there is a canyon between the top two conferences in this sport and everyone else. And so I look at that and I say, they're negotiating the future of the playoff right now. If you take feelings out of it, if you take your emotion out of it, if you take the way you want it to look in a perfect world out of it, you're kind of approaching the point where you can't even seriously pretend that all of those leagues are kind of playing the same sport. They are, in a sense that it's 11 on 11, and they're all playing the same number of games, and any given year, certainly the best team from the Big 12 could be competitive. That's not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is those two leagues are playing a different caliber sport than everyone else. And so you can either look at it and try and make yourself feel good and say, well, no, the playoff structure should guarantee this or guarantee that. Or you can look at it and say, honestly, if we just went heartless and we just stacked this thing purely in terms of merit, they're looking for 4 auto bid spots apiece. Truth be told, they'd probably get more than 8 apiece if you just did it purely on merit. My advice, by the way, on a related note, to the folks out there in non-Big Ten and SEC shoes is you probably need to agree to that format now that locks you at least as the ACC or the Big 12 into getting guaranteed spots at the table. Because if it were to go the alternative route, you may not even get that. Because that's a trend that's not going to reverse itself, I don't think, in the foreseeable future. I don't like it. In fact, I really, really dislike it, but it doesn't change the fact that it is right now. Academy Sports and Outdoors, though, has nothing to do with that. And if you're a Clemson fan, it's not your fault, and they got your gear there anyway. And if you are a fan of a Big 12 school, or if you're a Mountain West fan, not your fault, not our fault, right? Couldn't be us, and they got your gear anyway. However, you should especially know that Academy is the new home of Jordan Brand. I know, yes, we broke the news exclusively-ish on the show last week. Now, they've got a promotion going. Candidly, I was curious how many of you would take us up on this. The answer was a lot of you. So I'm going to read it again. We'll do this for a few shows because I'm always looking out for you and trying to get you free stuff. So the deal over there right now is any of you who go and spend $50 or more on Jordan gear at Academy, just save the receipt, take a picture of it, whatever, post it, any of the socials. You need to do 2 things. Hashtag it, AcademyXJordan, and then tag me, Josh Pate CFB, and tag Academy. You do that, we're sending out a ton of gift cards. In fact, until the well runs dry over here, we're sending out gift cards. A bunch of you did it the other night, like a suspicious amount of you did it the other night, so I'm sure we'll get more returns on that. But whomst amongst us knew? Jordan and Academy. Almost as good a marriage as Pate State and Academy, I would say, almost. All right, let's roll on. Got a ton to get to still. We need to speed it up, honestly. I need to speed it up. The transfer portal is closed. So there you go. That was your spring transfer portal period. So now that we have all of the portal window closed for this year, and you pretty much know who's going to be on your teams now, what do we make of all this? Well, the first team I want to talk about is LSU, because that's the team that fundamentally took itself from very much a question mark to very much a college football playoff contender. And I'm not sure, outside of LSU circles, I'm not sure how much the general college football public understands what just happened here, but they got the number one transfer portal class. They took 11 blue chip kids, and it's not one position group. Like Texas, defensive line, yes. Penn State, wide receiver, yes. At LSU, it's D-line, it's wide receiver, it's DB, it's offensive line. They were on the precipice. Honestly, they were on the precipice of major overhaul down there, because had they stood still and not done anything in the portal, they were going to lose more games than is acceptable for LSU this fall. And I would expect coaching staff change. Candidly, that's where I thought it was headed. And then they got their act together. Certain people particularly down there got their act together, and they've been rewarded handsomely lately. And instead of what I just said, they are a bona fide playoff contender now. Now, this is not a team yet. A bunch of guys who have never worn the LSU uniform in a game are going to be depended upon to provide that kind of product on the field. It's no guarantee. We've seen Florida State shine and crumble entirely trying to go the portal route. I think LSU just knocked it out of the park as thoroughly as they could. Now, listen, Austin Thomas is a rock star down there. He's the general manager at LSU, and you may be seeing headlines around there. Some guy named Austin Thomas just got his salary doubled. Dude's going to be making close to $1 million a year. He's probably underpaid based on what he was just able to do with this particular portal class, where LSU would have been, where they are now, and what it took to make it happen. And the folks that he had to knock some truth and sense into to make it happen, that dude just came through for LSU. So I know there are a lot of general manager names that float around out there, as they should. You better insert Austin Thomas in there, because if LSU is anywhere in this race like I think they'll be this year, he had a ton to do with it. And congrats to him on the salary bump, by the way. Very well deserved. Texas Tech pulled the lever very hard. You see them right there. They're the number 2 portal class, but they're by far the biggest just all-in portal lever puller, as I would call it. You could call it portal dice roll or portal roulette. I just call it the portal lever. Lever. You choose the pronunciation. But they looked at the landscape and they said, well, we print money here, and the rules are what they are for at least one more cycle. So let's just go all in. We haven't had a double-digit win season since 2008. Let's just go all in. And all in they went. They took 20 kids. They took 13 blue chip kids. I was out there about 3 weeks ago, and I'll tell you this, and you can take it for what it is. It could mean everything. It could mean nothing. When you walk around the building there, they look physically, when you just watch the players walk around, it looks like you're in Ann Arbor or Athens or somewhere like that. Maybe not quite Athens, but if you go to South Carolina or you go to Arkansas. Arkansas is a really good example. Just anywhere where you're in one of those major conferences, there are alien-like bodies just walking around the hallway. And you wonder, where did they find these people? It's what it looks like at Texas Tech right now. And the reason is because they went to all those other places and got their players. So I am morbidly fascinated to see how this plays out this fall, because there's a really unique dynamic there. On one hand, like I said, they haven't won 10 or more games since 2008. So you would not classically think of Texas Tech as this pressure cooker of a job. So therefore, you would not think of Joey McGuire as being under disproportionate amounts of pressure this fall. But he is, because they don't care about what their history is, because they've never gone all in on a season like they are now in the past. So they don't care about the past. They're saying, well, our expectations for this fall are based on how all in we are for this fall. Now, Joey gets it. I've talked to him about it. He gets it. He embraces it. What else are you going to do? So Texas Tech's going to be a fun one to watch this fall. Oregon, again, a team in Oregon that everyone blindly is ready to expect to be in the national championship hunt every year. I am one of those people. I'm not blind. I know what they've done, but if I didn't know what they've done, but I only knew who was in charge there, I think, yeah, Oregon, Kind of like FanDuel. FanDuel would blindly make Oregon one of the favorites, just like they do Georgia or Texas. They're the kind of brand now that is earned benefit of the doubt, and they're always going to be in that conversation. Well, here's the thing. Oregon could have had terminal issues on the offensive line had they not addressed it. They could have been a team that came into this season and you looked at it and you said, what wide receiver has been for Penn State lately, O-line will be for Oregon. Don't care how good they are elsewhere, that offensive line is going to hold them back. Then they went and got Isaiah World at left tackle, and they got Emmanuel Pregnon at guard, and they got Alex Harkey at right tackle, and they just fundamentally overhauled their offensive line. As I always say in portal segments, that's no guarantee it'll play out. Every year we see abject busts out of the portal. We also know that some of these schools are far more cerebral in their approach to the portal than others. Therefore, they're going to have a higher hit rate than others. Malachi Hughes, also a running back out of Tulane. When I was down at Tulane last month, John Summerall talked about that kid like he was his agent. And he didn't owe him anything, but he just said the kid's going to destroy it at Oregon. And then they went and got Thieneman, I believe, the safety out of Purdue. That's probably a plug-and-play all Big Ten caliber safety for Oregon. So I don't want to say it's just on the O-line, but their over-under win total is 10.5 again this year. They're the number 2 favorite in the odds to win the Big Ten. Again, big caveat, big asterisk. If all of those pieces gel and the injury luck is on their side, copy and paste for every team. Oregon had a huge and very necessary haul in the portal. Miami, I think we could do a whole show on how important Carson Beck is. We just watched Miami pump out the number 1 overall pick in the draft. Did you see they had Restrepo go undrafted? And then the Titans proceeded to pick him up and put him with Cam Ward. I don't know how the rest of the league allowed that. But anyway, so Cam Ward out the door. And it is very much true that they pissed away a shot at doing a lot more than they did last year because they couldn't do anything defensively to couple with having Cam Ward, just like LSU with Daniels the year before. You don't want to call it a wasted season because it's not like they went 5-7 or anything like that, but they greatly underachieved. And that's crazy because Miami had double-digit wins last year. And so relative to recent history, that's a great year. Relative to what they were capable of, had they been better defensively, they underachieved. So Mario Cristobal didn't really wait around. He fired a bunch of guys on the defensive side of the ball and went and changed defensive coordinators, but also they went in the portal after being 94th in explosive plays allowed last year, and they overhauled their entire secondary. They got a pair of corners, I think 3 corners. They got a safety, D-line help. Wonder on the other side if there's still some wide receiver help out there maybe for them, but that all just funnels back down to the main event there, and that is, how's Carson Beck going to play? As it stands right now at FanDuel, Miami has the second best odds to win the league this upcoming year. Clemson's your pretty solid favorite right now in the odds market. So Miami certainly, pretty much everything defensively had to be scrutinized after last year. You can't let that happen again. You saw USC and LSU really hit that button last year and start to scale up their defensive performance. That needs to be Miami this year. They won't be a top 10 defense in the country. They just need to be way better than they were last year. Penn State and Texas, these are not teams that had top to bottom needs, but they had glaring needs at certain positions. I thought they both filled that out pretty nicely. I think Penn State forever has felt like they got to get help at wide receiver, and finally they did. They got Hudson out of USC, Devontae Ross out of Troy, Trevor Pena this past weekend. Knew he had taken a visit to Penn State. He had Miami, USC, had some others. Penn State stepped up, and they got him. And that's probably your best 3 receivers on that team this year, and they're all transfer portal additions. So we don't know this because you can't know any of this at this point. But I think it's pretty easy to say outside of receiver, Penn State's got a lot of known commodities coming back from a team that was in, the semifinals last year. So Penn State's a pretty reliable contender this year. But you may have looked at them and said, yeah, but, that wide receiver room's not going to win a national title. That wide receiver room's not going to win the Big Ten. They can't. There's a permanently enhanced ceiling on that team's potential as long as that wide receiver room looks like that. Okay, unbeknownst to us, the key could have been put in the ignition and turned on the team's potential with these additions, which is always the fun, like, second of the two sides of the coin this time of year, because everyone can talk about the bust potential, but what you don't know is whether Penn State scenario A this upcoming season was going to be just shy of being good enough, and yet they just created a scenario B for themselves by adding one, two, or all three of these receivers. You never know that. And that's why I always love taking these kind of segments and looking back on them in November. Because at that point, the guesswork's over, and you kind of, you know what caliber team you have. You know who did and didn't pan out of the portal. But it wouldn't surprise me if we get to November and Penn State's offense has just ticked up a notch or two, and you're looking back and you're saying, wow, those receiver additions, those, I don't know how much they paid those guys. It was worth its weight in gold because everything else was ready-made to win. And they got the final missing piece. Texas, you could say the same thing about D-line with them. They've been stockpiling talent so well that the past 2 years consecutively, the draft has gutted them, specifically on the interior of their defensive line. So I think they added 10 kids in the portal, and half of them were defensive linemen. And they had to do it. They had to do it. So elsewhere, they're a pretty ready-made winner too. They added guys 333, 311, 305, 330, 313. The lightest of the defensive linemen they added was 305 pounds. Every other one of them 311 or heavier. So moving Texas off the ball this fall could prove challenging, which would fall right in line with what they've been like recently. What didn't happen in the portal? That's a very important headline as well. What didn't happen? I'll tell you what didn't happen. In the spring portal window, Ohio State didn't lose a kid. Alabama, I think they're the only team in the SEC that didn't lose a kid in the spring portal window. That's important. That was not the headline last year, especially for Alabama. So that is very important. I'll tell you another one. Arizona State. They lost a couple of guys, but they didn't lose any frontline guys. And you should pay attention. Those of you who like to keep meticulous notes, Arizona State went to the playoff last year. They won the Big 12. They went to the playoff last year. You would think that kind of team would have their coaching staff get gutted and they would have their roster get gutted. And neither of those things happened. And I'll tell you, he wouldn't mind this. I was out there a couple of weeks ago, and when I go out there, I sit in on everything. I mean, Kenny Dillingham goes to the bathroom, and I like walking, all right, I'll sit out here for this, but everything else I want to observe, right? He goes, right, I'll be out in a second. And I went in their team meeting, and he sat there and told that entire room, he told that entire team, you want to go in the portal? You want to get out of here? Just let me know. Not only will we facilitate it, I'll help you. I will promote you. I don't want anyone here who don't want to be here. And that is the antithesis, candidly, of the way it is most other places. I mean, Dillingham, he almost encouraged guys to hit the portal, not because he actually wanted them to, but because anybody who had an inkling of a doubt they wanted to be on that team, he wanted to go ahead and proactively, let's start the process. Let's get you out of here. So they had a few backup types that he helped get out of there and find new spots, but none of their starters left. And that coaching staff's intact. So this fall, I'd make them the favorite in the Big 12 again this fall because of that. But the Big 12 is going to be very, very fun to watch. But just remember all this spring portal window, a lot of teams just fundamentally altered the conference and playoff pictures respectively this fall. You can't quite know where. I got good guesses, but you can't quite know where. They're watching us in Sonoma, California, Lawrence, Kansas, Natchez, Mississippi. Some would say Natchez. I say Natchez, Mississippi. We appreciate you guys. Got a lot in the live chat as well. There you go. Here, you know what? There's my smiley face to prove to you we're live. Had to start the show a little bit early tonight because I'm flying to beautiful Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania tonight. There's a slight clue as to where we're headed tomorrow. Cheers, Black Cherry Zevia on the show tonight, by the way. Rarely seen Black Cherry Zevia. Still zero sugar, though, as usual. A question comes to us from Ezra by way of Boston, Massachusetts. He said, I need you to speak on Shedeur Sanders sliding in the draft. Tell what's going on from the side of Saturday, because the folks all about Sundays are wonky about it. Now, Ezra is calling out the good name of people who cover the NFL. It was a mess, though, wasn't it? So Shedeur Sanders was mock drafted in many first rounds, and pretty much everyone, Jesse, I would think, had him at least top 2 rounds. I thought he was going first round. I don't pay much attention to the draft from that angle, so I don't really care. But he did not go first round, nor second, nor third, nor fourth. So I watched this the other night, and here's what's crazy about it. I never reach out to NFL front offices for feedback because I don't do an NFL show. As the draft was going on, I was getting feedback from NFL front offices, and I don't even ask for it. But once the draft started going the way it went, it was if I took this Zevia here and I hadn't opened it, but I just shook it up, there would be a ton of pressure built up, but it doesn't release until you pop the top on it. Once the draft got into like round 2 and 3 especially, everyone popped the top and the information just started flowing left and right. And the feedback just started flowing left and right. So, for instance, like I was in touch with a team that didn't have Shedeur on their board. So he was just a no take at any point for them. And I was getting the feedback as to why. It was the stuff that you heard. It was the stuff Todd McShay had talked about with the Giants, only I wasn't talking to anyone with the Giants. I don't think I know anyone with the Giants. But anyway, that was feedback that was widely shared around the league. He was a disaster in the interview process. He rubbed us the wrong way. He was ill-prepared. Almost to the point where you felt like he was mailing in the process because he had a disproportionately inflated sense of what his stock was in the draft versus what it was. So I heard that like a bunch of other people did. So you can take that for what it is. That's not my feedback because I didn't evaluate him. But a lot of people in front offices thought that way. So you remember a long time ago, I guess last year, I did a segment on the show. We were talking about something called the Deion tax. And I wasn't talking about it from the standpoint of a player. I was talking about it from the standpoint of college football fans. We had to create a term called the Deion tax on the show. And the Deion tax was the price that all of us were paying for the increased amount of attention and exposure that Deion brought to college football. Because on one hand, you love that the game is getting promoted and more people are watching it, and people who otherwise wouldn't have been watching college football are coming to the table on Saturday. That's always a good thing. You always love that. However, the tax was a lot of people without much of a clue about college football were coming in the door because of Deion, which is a good thing, but the bad thing was they didn't quietly come in the door. A lot of them came in the door and couldn't wait to shout their opinions from every corner and every rooftop, and it was just ignorance in a lot of cases. And so people like us, hardcore college football fans, we looked around and we said, we love that you're here. Maybe just shut up for 5 minutes and sort of get a lay of the land before you just start running your mouth. That was the Deion tax. Fans did it, media did it, a lot of media did it. Okay, so fast forward to this past weekend. Shedeur starts falling in the draft. And a lot of people were tagging me on social and they were saying, could it be that Shedeur is paying the Deion tax? And I got where you were going with that, although that's not what I meant when I said the Deion tax. But what you were saying was, is Deion Sanders a weight around Shedeur's draft stock? And I think you can make that argument. Like, I don't have specific knowledge of that, but I do get where you would be going with that. I think you could also, look, guys, you could also ask this. You could also ask, because this is something that, I'll give you some feedback I got from a front office type. It wasn't, we're terrified to draft him because of the Deion factor. It's actually the other way around. I had some feedback that sounded a lot more like this. We're sort of low-key concerned about what he'd be like being detached from Deion for the first time, because he wasn't the most mature kid in the world that we interviewed. When we brought him in and we met with him as an organization, we were left thinking, yeah, he seemed a little ill-prepared, but we've seen that before. But they looked at it and said, man, actually, we wish that Deion could come with him. We think he'd be better prepared if Deion could just be with him 24/7. So if you want to call that the Deion tax, call it the Deion tax. I just looked at it and I thought many things. I thought, number one, clearly the mock draft industry / media bubble that is fun to follow and it surrounds the draft had a vastly overinflated sense of where he was going to go. Again, not the first time that's ever happened, but to this extreme degree it was. But then again, this was also a one-of-one situation because not everyone's dad is Deion Sanders. Not every player coming out does have a full production company surrounding him. And not everyone has the expectation already baked in to their DNA because of what their last name is, like Shedeur Sanders has. So I think he's a heck of a football player. But I made that feeling known during the season. We had a question last week where someone asked, could he be the most overrated player in the draft? I guess you feel pretty good right now, given the results here. But my response was, well, if you're just talking about the player, I looked at him produce despite having virtually no supporting cast around him. I said, two things you knew about Shedeur was he was going to draw eyeballs and his uniform was going to be green every week because he didn't have any offensive line to speak of. So that's the way I looked at the player. Clearly, I'm not running a front office at the NFL level, and they do have to care about more than that, and they did. And I think a lot of them made that abundantly clear. But one thing's for sure, I don't know if Shedeur paid the Deion tax or if teams just didn't think he was that good. But I do know we paid the Deion tax yet again this past weekend. We've paid the Deion tax for a while in the fact that that guy is such a big deal. He's brought people into the sport that otherwise wouldn't have anything to do with the sport, and they've run their mouth even though they know nothing about what they're talking about. That's part of the Deion tax. And then this past weekend, many people who wouldn't talk about the draft much, because of the nature of how the draft went for Shedeur Sanders, took it upon themselves to assume everyone cared about their opinion on the draft, and they spoke about the draft. And some of the most mind-numbing ignorance you could ever hope to see poured out all weekend. And it was full Care Bear suicide. If you know that GIF, I use it often on Twitter. You know exactly what I'm talking about. It's a little Care Bear, and it hurls itself in front of an oncoming truck. That's how I felt. Collusion. That's a word that was thrown around a lot this past weekend. There was no more collusion in the NFL level against Shedeur Sanders than there is collusion in a major town when a road's flooded and no one wants to drive down it. They didn't drive down it because they perceived the risk as not being worth trying to go down the road, and there were other routes available. It's as simple as that. Shedeur Sanders, I can think whatever I think about him. I'm not drafting him. But there are 32 franchises that had a shot. Realistically, half of them didn't have a need, and so the market is much smaller than 32 teams. And then some of them had concerns that removed him from their board entirely. And so you concentrate the market down even more. So what are we talking about? 10 teams maybe. And then it gets deeper and deeper in the draft. And you want a starter in the first round, maybe the second round. But after that, historically, you're drafting backups at that position in the NFL. And you want those dudes to be church mice when they come in. And Shedeur Sanders will never be that. And so a lot of them looked at it and said, it doesn't make sense to draft this kid as a backup either. So we are removing ourselves from the equation. So you probably had a market out of 32 teams of like 5 that were even willing to touch him by that point, if that. And that's what happened. Collusion didn't happen. And anyone throwing that around, just collusion. Here's 2 things about collusion. Number 1, it exists. Number 2, it's not a catch-all explanation anytime something doesn't go the way you think it should go, or something goes in a way other than a way that would make you feel good. It's not always collusion. The world's not always out to get you. Sometimes you may have had an overinflated sense of self. Sometimes the market may have had an overinflated sense of who you are. Here's the important point, though. Did he get drafted? Albeit to the worst possible place to land as a quarterback. But did he get drafted? He did get drafted. So now, here's my opinion on Shedeur Sanders. If he's given a shot to succeed, he'll succeed because I think he could be an NFL quarterback. That is an evaluation of him as a player. I think that if there was any edge that needed to get knocked off of him or any sense of reality that needed to get injected into him, I'm fairly certain if it's ever going to happen, this little ordeal over the past weekend of his life did it. And if it didn't, nothing will. So if they're right about that, from the neck up perspective of him as a player, then who knows, maybe he'll wash out. But if they're wrong about that, or if it's a variable that could change, This will change it. And then you're just left with the skill set. And man, I think he's got the skill set to succeed at that level. I think players with a lesser skill set than Shedeur Sanders have succeeded for years in that league. They're doing it right now. So my personal feel is he will. I just don't know if he had landed in a more stable organization. I feel good talking that way. He landed in Cleveland. And not even Browns fans get offended when I say that. He landed in Cleveland, so I got no clue. But I do know it was a one-of-one situation. I was glued to it. As Mel Kiper is my witness, I couldn't turn it off. I could not turn the draft off this week. And I'm normally someone, because I'm a college football guy, outside of watching the first round, I'm in the gym getting periodic updates on my phone. I rearranged my Saturday to revolve around draft coverage. That's how glued I was to the draft. So I'm not saying conspiracy theory, but if this thing is all just run by a production company and everyone's in on it as an actor and the games are really just simulated like WWE matches, they got me. They got me. Hook, line, and sinker. They got me. Let's move on because we had another question about this that I also wanted to address about another player at that position. Matt from beautiful Missoula, Montana, he hit me and said, is Quinn Ewers declaring for the draft one of the biggest mistakes we've seen in recent college football history? He could have been a huge NIL guy in college football, and instead he barely got drafted. This is one where I told you I think a lot of people are going to disagree with me on earlier in the show. I think what Matt just said reflects what most people think about this. I'd say 90+% of people look, knowing what Quinn Ewers' situation was last year. He started at Texas. He was a playoff quarterback, a former #1 overall rated player out of high school. It is well documented he had big offers to go play elsewhere this year in college. He would have been a $3 or $4 million in a year guy. Just telling you that would have happened. Not at Texas, though. He would have left Texas. It's Arch Manning's time at Texas, just like Milroe. If Milroe stayed, it would not have been at Alabama. It would have been elsewhere this year. It's a really unique situation, I know, but that's the way it was going to happen. But many, I think a super majority of fans looked and said, Quinn Ewers goes in the 7th round when he could have had $4+ million to go play one more year of college football. What a stupid decision. Well, it's only stupid if he has typical priorities, but he doesn't. He was tired of being a college football player. He wanted to go play professional football. So if that's your priority and your family is extremely well off financially anyway, you're not in a typical situation. He is not a guy who grew up struggling to rub 2 dimes together. So it's never been a situation of financial necessity that he maximize his earnings right now. And also, he's not going to be in a poverty situation signing an NFL deal even in the 7th round. Let's understand that. But also, is it not funny to anyone other than me that you got this group of casual fans that scream at kids when they chase a bag in college football, and that same crowd's criticizing Quinn Ewers for turning down a bag to chase his dream? What exactly are you wanting guys to do? They chase the bag in college, and shame on them. And then you got one that says $4 million, huh? No, I think I'll go chase my dream. I want to be an NFL player. And you know what? If I go in the 6th or 7th round, that's okay. I just want a shot. All due respect, thank you for your time. I'm going to turn down the money. What an idiot! Is it true? Was that song true? You can't please everyone, so you just got to please yourself. Were they right this whole time? I think they may have been. Also, might I use the L word here? I don't think anyone knows where I'm going. Jesse and Colin, do you know where I'm going? No one knows. No one knows. Legacy. Legacy matters. Quinn Ewers, I don't even know if I don't even know if his mind is thinking this way right now, but mine is. Quinn Ewers left millions of dollars on the table to go to the NFL. A very, very uncertain path. I don't know that he'll ever earn $4 million in a year in his life again. He may be 2 years away from fundamentally altering his earnings potential in his career. It's a big roll of the dice from a financial standpoint. But then again, the guy was tired of being a college football player. He wanted to be a pro football player. He believes in himself. That's all great. It's all great. I don't think it's a terrible decision because that was his priority structure. But also, I want you to think about something. I want you to think about the value of legacy. You've always taken it for granted because up until about 10 minutes ago, guys began and played and finished their career at one school. But that's becoming less and less of a norm, especially at his position. Do you know over the next 30 years how much it's worth to Quinn Ewers on the speaking circuit, at public events and functions, to be able to market himself as a legacy former Texas quarterback and nothing else, just Texas quarterback? Because maybe not in 1 year, but over several years, that's worth a whole heck of a lot more than $4 million. And if you don't believe me, you don't know much about the state of Texas, that Longhorn brand, that position, and what it means to be able to market yourself accordingly. You go ask Colt McCoy. Now, Colt McCoy had a more, I don't know how you'd compare the careers, but you ask Colt McCoy, he goes and speaks in Amarillo, or he speaks in Denton. He goes to those quarterback clubs. You ask Colt McCoy if he wanted to press the issue, how much he could earn. If he wanted to do 20 dates this year, public speaking, how much he'd earn. I think you'd be shocked. That's not just Texas, but it's especially Texas. So Quinn Ewers, even if he never does anything in the NFL, he gets to market himself until the end of time as a former Texas quarterback. And that's it. Not a kid who transferred from Texas, not a kid who chased an NIL dream elsewhere because it was Arch Manning's time. He's just Quinn Ewers, former Texas quarterback. And folks appreciate that, especially those deeper pockets, which tend to be your older crowd. They appreciate that stuff, and they always will, and they should. So I guess I'm going to be in the minority again because I don't think it's the dumbest thing in the world for Quinn Ewers to chase his dream, as long as he stops by Quick Trip every now and then. Because if he doesn't, he's dead to all of us. Quick Trip, in the coming days, I've got to inform you, we just got to do some old school ballot box stuffing for Quick Trip. It's that time of year, April? But yeah, it is that time of year to vote for best gas station on the planet, and we got to do this. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. We've got to do this for Quick Trip because they fuel us. I'm going to be on the road all week, and they're fueling that. So we got to help our friends at Quick Trip. They've got the gas you need. They've got the cold brew on demand, on tap that you need. Some of you still are paying with your credit card at the pump and just leaving, and we appreciate that. But guys, you got to take 2 minutes out of your life and go in Quick Trip and see what I'm talking about with the cold brew on tap. You know what on tap means. I just don't think you've seen cold brew on tap. Like 8 different varieties, very colorful handles, and you pull that tap and out comes the cold brew. It's wonderful. Well, dare I say life-changing? At the very least, it'll change your life and that you won't go to sleep for the next 24 hours. And I need that frequently. So we appreciate Quick Trip. Let's roll on. We've got a very, very eclectic couple of segments here still to talk about. And then I've got to get on a plane tonight. Jet fuel? Does Quick Trip do jet fuel? I don't know. Anyway, Ricky from Philadelphia hit me. He said, what do we make of Softy, James Franklin, getting angry with fans at the Penn State spring game? I think it's reasons like this that he and Penn State will never win the big one. What is Ricky talking about? What is Ricky from Philly talking about? Well, we are showing you footage. If you're not watching on YouTube, this is James Franklin yesterday at the Penn State spring game. Allegedly, someone called him a fraud. This is allegedly. We don't have clear enough audio to discern it for ourselves. Clearly, someone in the crowd said something James Franklin didn't like. So James Franklin went and confronted the fan, whomsoever it was. He could have been a student, could have been 85 years old. He went and confronted the person. And this is all we have. This is all the footage we have to go on. It's like Penn State Zapruder film. This is all we have to go on, and so we can break it down. Here's what I will tell you. Many people called this childish. Yeah, it is. They called it immature. Yes, it is. Very short-sighted for a coach to be concerned with individual voices in the crowd. Yes, of course it is. Am I going to criticize it? Absolutely not. I back it every step of the way, and because I don't want to be a hypocrite. And what I say there is, if I were James Franklin, I'd do the same thing. I'd be so tired of it. I defend James Franklin a lot on this show. I get accused of homerism, and it may be that. It may be. It's not that he and I grew up together. I like James Franklin. We've got a good relationship with that program, but I don't care if they lock the doors on us as a program. Fundamentally, I look at that guy's track record, and it's really good. It's not elite. It's really good. and he always gets labeled as overrated, and we fought that battle a million times on this show, and I've won pretty handedly. But if he got called a fraud, James Franklin's not a fraud. So if he got called a fraud, if I were him and I were in his position, I'd probably ignore it 99 times out of 100. You know what? No one would be rolling on their cell phone when I did that. So the one time out of 100, it just got to me for whatever reason. Maybe my car didn't start this morning. Some grad assistant parked in my parking spot. They didn't have the coffee warmed up for me. I'm already mad. And some guy called me a fraud. Like Harold from Harrisburg up here called me a fraud. You know what? I'm going up to Harold from Harrisburg and I'm saying, come down here. Challenge me on it. Not physically. We're not resulting to fisticuffs here. But I listened to the audio. It sounded like Franklin said, come down here and talk to me about it. That's a toxic trait of mine. Candidly, it'd probably get me fired. I probably wouldn't win as much as James Franklin has. And yet I would be challenging fans like this at my spring game. I would challenge him. Debate me right now. I'd probably call my digital media team over. And I would say, you rolling on this? Give him a mic. Mic him. Challenge me. Prove I'm a fraud. Give me your evidence. What's your evidence? I'd do it. I wouldn't last long. Franklin has, so credit to him. I wouldn't last long. It's just hard for me to criticize this stuff when I would be the same way. Does he need to focus on the right things? Of course he does. Does he need to ignore all this garbage? Yes. I don't even deny all this. So a lot of your criticisms of him, I see the validity in it. There's a lot of merit to it. I have a point. I have a point where the cup is full, and then every drop thereafter, the cup runneth over. And I just don't think my cup would be very big. Immunity. I don't think it would be big enough to fit all that. Immunity, we got to move on. I just think I'd end up doing the same thing. I know good and well one of you would capture it on cell phone, and I would get castigated just like James Franklin was today. But I also want to remind you, Colin, do me a favor. I ask you this like once a month. Put the question back up for a second, because there was a part of this. I got an itch on my nose. There's a part of this. Ricky from Philly, he went there. He said, I think it's reasons like this that he and Penn State will never win the big one. Well, Ricky, might I remind you that like 5 minutes ago, Ryan Day went after Lou Holtz. Lou Holtz, 115 years old. Lou Holtz was like Foreman when he fought Ali. He's like 115 years old. And didn't Ryan Day just go after Lou Holtz on national TV after they beat Notre Dame last year? And how did Ryan Day's team fare last year? So it is not a limiting factor if you get a little petty every now and then, or you focus on the wrong things every now and then. Sometimes it's you call out a senior citizen on live TV. Whomst amongst us hasn't? Sometimes you challenge a sophomore at Penn State to a debate right there on the field in the spring game. Whomst amongst us wouldn't? That's not the limiting factor. If they can't move the ball forward on third down, if they can't find dependability at the receiver position, these are the kinds of things that keep Penn State from winning a national championship. It's not whether or not James Franklin debates a student who may or may not have called him a fraud, allegedly. That's part 2 of the show tonight that I think I'll get a lot of disagreement on. The Quinn Ewers draft thing and the James Franklin yelling at a fan at the blue and white game thing. I know it's going to happen. I'm ready for it. Go ahead and bring it. I know we'll probably be accused of clickbait pating on that one, I think, Jesse. So, Colin, make the thumbnail extra ugly so people don't think we're doing that. Let's move on. We got a what if here, and then I want to wrap the show with the trifecta of disagreement tonight, because one of you had the audacity on the college football show that I do to ask me about one Mel Kiper. And I am happy to answer. But first, Jeff hit us during What If season. He said, what if Alabama misses the playoff again? Well, Jeff, it would be a crisis. It would be a crisis. It would be National Guard activation level stuff. So I did a quick glance. Over at FanDuel right now, Bama's got the 3rd best odds to win the SEC. They have got the 7th best odds to win the national title this year. So we can draw from that they're expected to be a playoff team at the very least. We have them internally, not FanDuel, but we internally have them graded as having the 4th toughest schedule in the country this year. But that will that will adjust a little bit, but that doesn't mean it'll change. They could have a tougher schedule or seventh toughest. They got a tough schedule this year. So, per usual, Jeff, on these what ifs, I need the details. Are they going 6-6? Or are they going 9-3 with 3 losses by combined 11 points? Because if that's the case, it's just it's a tough break. Is basically what it amounts to. I'm sure that Ariel and Alabaster wouldn't feel the same way. I know good and well Chad and Clio wouldn't feel the same way. I'm just naming random small Alabama towns at this point. Earl and Alexander City. No alliteration there. I'm sorry. Earl in Utah. Spelled with an E. Utah in Alabama. Look it up. It's right there on the interstate between the Tuscaloosa and like the Mississippi state line, I think. So this is not a wild concept, is my point. I'm going to say some things here. Bama fans are going to yeah but every one of them. And I could yeah but it too. But just these are truthful statements. You did just lose a third-round caliber quarterback. Now, I know every one of you is yelling, yeah, good. Yeah, Milroe held us back last year. In many ways, well, in some cases, he did. Yes. Okay. My point is, you're not just magically guaranteed to upgrade over him. You hope you do. You think you will. It's not guaranteed. You got a really tough schedule, like I just said. Again, I think you're way better at receiver this year. I think you're way better at defensive back. You didn't lose a single guy in the transfer portal after spring. You retained a lot of guys that could have gone to the draft to come back for another year. You're set up to succeed this year. It doesn't matter on 4th and 2 when LSU's in town, is my point. Like, that's how this season will be determined. 11-1 versus 8-4 is going to come down to like half a dozen plays. So it's not the craziest thing in the world to think Bama could go 9-3 this year and just miss out on the playoff. That's not the craziest thing in the world. Also, if you do want to flip that on its ear and you want to say it can't be as bad as it was last year, I kind of agree with you. Because I don't think you're going to be 123rd in penalty yards per game again. I don't think you'll be 97th in turnover again. I don't think you'll be as terrible as you were on 3rd and 7+ again. Like I said, wide receiver and defensive back, both massively upgraded position units. Second-year head coach, normally you see a little scalability. Yeah, I think Bama will be better. Yeah, I think I'd predict them in my playoff right now. But if they're not there, that's a big what if, Jeff. If they're not there at 9-3 versus they're not there because they lost 3 or 4 games by double digits, well, that's a much different world. So it's April. That's how I choose to answer these things in April. FanDuel has the odds that I just read to you. They have them over there right now. They have Bama odds to win it all. They have Bama odds to win the SEC. They have Bama over under 9.5 wins. Or maybe you couldn't care less about Alabama and you just want to go bet something else entirely. You can also do that. I'm told, although I can't myself prove it, that the NBA playoffs are happening right now. And if that is true, Jesse's that's true. Yeah, that's true. Okay. You could go bet those as well. Or you couldn't bet anything because maybe you don't bet. And if you don't, and I'm not sitting here encouraging you to start, you may just be curious about what those odds even mean. What do they look like? Purely for research purposes. Perpi. You can go over there. It's not illegal. You can go over there. It actually, in many ways, it's what I used to do. Back in the day, I used to look at some of the offshores, not because I was about to place a dime, because I didn't have a dime to place on it. I just was curious, like, what are the odds? What are the conference odds? I'm not going to bet it. I couldn't bet it at the time. I just went and looked out of curiosity. You can do that as well. It's no sweat. But if you want to bet $10 on it, go bet $10 on it. Finally on the show tonight, I don't think for the life of me I ever expected this question on this show. For the life of me, I'm going to take a chug of water right quick. For the life of me, I don't think I ever expected to be asked this, period. But yet here we are. Oh, thank you. So, mathematically, it's a fact someone's watching the show for the first time tonight. I promise you this is a 100% college football show. I promise you it is. It just so happens the draft just happened, and I watched it, and I was vocal about it this past weekend, and a lot of people noticed. So, I'm gonna end the show with this. Dan from Albany, New York, he said, "You're a fun Twitter follow, but how in the world can you defend Mel Kiper? He was obviously wrong and was blinded by vengeful rage and refused to admit he was wrong. Most of you know what Dan is talking about. If you don't, Mel Kiper just erupted this past weekend. Mel Kiper bordered on imploding in on himself like a dying star over Shedeur Sanders. He had Shedeur rated as his #1 overall quarterback, and then Shedeur fell to the 5th round. And I don't know how upset Dion was, but it pales in comparison to how upset Mel Kiper was. And I was entertained by every minute of it, and I said as such. So I did the classic comparative analysis. Some of you may watch pro wrestling, most of you don't. That's okay. So pro wrestling has like long since exposed itself, which is pathetic, by the way, which just means they give you the show and then they can't wait to tell you how they did it. That makes a magician's illusion all the better. They do it, and then 5 minutes later they have a press conference telling you how they did it. This is neither here nor there. But I made the point this past weekend that The Rock shows up a month ago, inserts himself into this big storyline leading up to WrestleMania, and then he's a ghost at WrestleMania, and everyone's like, well, wait a second. Where was The Rock? Point is, they bailed on an angle. And I looked at Mel Kiper, and Mel Kiper had been 10 toes down for Shedeur Sanders, and on night 1, as Shedeur kept falling in the draft, and Mel Kiper kept banging that drum louder and louder, and the night ended, and Mel Kiper said, this is crazy, and then they went off the air. I thought to myself, do not bail, Mel Kiper. You have built the ship. You got to go down with it. Stand tall. And he came on air the next day, and he, if anything, he crowded the plate more. He gripped the bat tighter. You could see sawdust coming off that thing. I was so happy with Mel Kiper because here is where I can tell many of you disagree with me. I don't know that Mel Kiper was wrong. He was wrong in his mock draft. So clearly, he and many other people whiffed about where Shedeur Sanders was going to go. But if that's being wrong, then everyone was wrong. I was wrong. You were wrong. Everyone was wrong. But I'm not talking about that. It's Mel Kiper's sincere belief that Shedeur Sanders was the best quarterback in this draft, and he's going to end up being a success. You don't know if he's wrong about that. It hasn't happened yet. So how do you know he's wrong? He was wrong in what he expected to happen in the draft. What he expects to happen in that kid's career, we'll see. We're all going to watch that. It'll be fascinating theater. But here's where I differ. I found I differ with many of you on this. I rely on people like Mel Kiper to have well thought out opinions, and then I want them to be steadfast and present them and don't back down on air. That's all I need. Really, at the end of the day, we're talking about a draft to go play football. That's really what we're talking about. And so I don't need to agree with you. Who in the world on TV do you agree with 100% of the time? Who in life do you agree with 100% of the time? What would you rather have seen Mel Kiper do? I genuinely ask this because I think many of us disagree on this. So I watched Mel Kiper night 1, and he's Shedeur, and then day 2, he's even more hardcore, and then day 3, he was apoplectic. And I thought it was just some of the best TV I've ever seen, and I disagree with a lot of what he said. I don't care. At the end of the day, it's not the worst thing in the world if I disagree with someone. What I'd much rather see is Mel Kiper stand solidly and like principled behind a belief of his, no matter how many people disagree, than to waffle on it. That's what I didn't want to see. And so I appreciated it. That was my point. He said a lot of stuff that I personally disagreed with. If he were sitting here right now, I mean, we could have a conversation about it, and I'd have like 5 points I disagreed on, but I'd be so appreciative of the way he handled himself. So I don't necessarily know that draft coverage is for me. I really don't, because apparently most of you disagreed with it. But then again, I would say that for everyone who turned it off because of Mel Kiper, I'd say many more people turned it on. But if you didn't like their coverage, I got great news for you. You could have flipped it over to NFL Network. You could have flipped it over to ABC. You could have flipped it over to many of the digital feeds. You could have gone and watched McAfee smoke vitamins on air. There are several options. It's the beauty of choice. So if you didn't like Mel Kiper, To me, if I didn't like Mel Kiper, I would have changed the channel. I did it a few times. He said some stuff. I said, let me go see what Saban's saying. Let me go see what they're saying on this channel. Klatt did coverage. Klatt did draft coverage this year. Let me go see what Joel Klatt's saying. I just changed the channel for a little while and come back. I didn't rage watch it. So that's how, to answer the question, that's how I defend Mel Kiper. Because he had an opinion and he stuck to it, and he may end up being crucified for this for the next decade. But you know what? Heaven help every one of you if Shedeur ends up getting a starting job in Cleveland. And I mean, if Cleveland is any kind of pulse this year on the radar in the AFC North, I pray for every one of you, because I'll be right there with Mel Kiper. Don't think I'll hesitate to say we in relation to me and Mel Kiper when Shedeur starts shining, if he does. I'll go me and Mel Kiper all day long. He will be insufferable if Shedeur Sanders succeeds in the NFL, and he should be. You think Kiper's going to get fired if Shedeur doesn't pan out? He's probably more likely to get fired if Shedeur thrives, because I don't think any human being that endured as much criticism as Mel Kiper just did this past weekend could contain themselves. I think it's a pumpkin pie in the face of the rest of humanity if Shedeur ends up doing anything at the NFL level, much less being the best guy at that position in this draft. So there you go. We probably talked more NFL on this show tonight than I will the rest of the year combined. It's just the way the show flowed naturally tonight. So I appreciate you guys so much. I got to go to the airport. We'll be on the road all week. I'll be back in Nashville in time for the Thursday show. So that's the schedule. But I'll have a lot on the socials this week. Josh Pate, CFB, if you want to tag along. Appreciate you so much. For Director Colin, producer Jesse, I'm Josh Pate. Take care. Have a great start to your week, and God bless.